Welcome, seekers of the profound. This is another riveting chapter of the Endless Possibilities podcast. Today, Gareth steers a discourse with Luciano and Rastal, delving into the enigmatic stages of consciousness. They explore the expansive realms of Brahman, Para-Brahman, and the mysterious landscape that stretches beyond enlightenment. They grapple with the trials of weaving profound states into the fabric of everyday life, sharing personal narratives and insights. Luciano unfurls the intriguing concept of potentiality, the collapse of perception, and the raw sensation of ceaselessly dying and being reborn in every fleeting moment. Moreover, they skim the surface of the intricate challenge of translating these experiences into words and the pivotal role of guiding fellow travelers on their spiritual journeys. Brace yourselves, for this is not your ordinary conversation. This is the Endless Possibilities podcast, where we venture into the depths of consciousness and beyond.
Hello and welcome to the Endless Possibilities podcast. My name is Gareth and I'm back for part 2 with Luciano and Rastal. Hello guys, welcome back.
What's up?
Very excited to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so we had a great conversation last time and a lot of positive comments. A lot of people asked us to talk about the later stages. And actually, there was actually a few comments I had seen, and people were really asking us to clarify the overlap between the states that I talk about, like God consciousness, unity consciousness, and the language you guys use, the levels or locations. So how would you like to start, guys?
Well, can I clarify something?
Sure.
Because even though I don't use a lot of the language of locations and layers.
Yeah.
I think we started that way because, of course, we both started working with the ideas that were developed by Jeffrey Martin. But it got to a point in which we really started mapping our own experiences because there was no map anymore. At that time, I think Jeffrey Martin really researched a lot of locations 1 to 4. And then he talked a little bit about locations 5 to 9. There was a little bit of those things in his website, but not a lot of information. And then what started to happen is that we started shifting and continued shifting. And then we started comparing notes, and then we developed our own mapping. So for example, I don't use a lot of the language of locations. I prefer like phases, or even stages. And nowadays, I even like to mix that with another idea that was developed by a colleague of us. His name is Pierce Salguero, and I think it would be a great person for you to interview in our podcast, because he developed a model called threads. So he really goes with the idea that, for example, there is the thread of emptiness. There is the thread of fullness. There is the thread of divinity. There is the thread, for example, of the unconscious. And not necessarily people need to follow like stages, first this one and this one and this one, because a lot of people, when they even talk to us, they say, yeah, but it's interesting because you guys talk about things so linearly, but my experience, it really doesn't match linearity. And then, for example, talking to people, we started realizing, for example, that some of them, they first go through the thread of emptiness, for example, from the beginning to the end. And then only later on, they go and explore more of the full side of things, the life side of things, right? Like unity consciousness, that is the epitome, or God consciousness, the epitome of the life side, that you are interconnected to everything. So even though I think it's useful to have a model on stages, because then the person knows where I am and where I'm gonna go. But at the same time, for some people, it's really useful to notice that they have a tendency, for example, to be much more connected to the light side rather than the empty side. So their experiences on the empty side, which is related to Brahman, for example, and I call non-existence, sometimes they are very brief brief, and sometimes they are even superficial, because their natural tendency is for connection, it's for life, it's for, you know, being really one with everything. So I just wanted to add this caveat, because I think models sometimes they are always wrong, but they are necessary, right? They are never perfect, obviously.
No, they're never perfect. And a lot of people seem to get caught up in the whole, it's almost like they confuse the map for the actual states, right? And they'll argue about them, and you'll
Right.
see people talking on Facebook threads and stuff like that. I've been working with lots of people, right, along that stage of awakening, right? And I've noticed that it's not linear, right? I have people who get glimpses into much further states before they reach stages that
Like
would come
stability.
earlier, right?
Right,
It
right.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, I've seen people like they come to me and I go, well, I've had, feelings of unity or oneness with everything and fullness. And then I go back and then I'm here. And then there's no solid state where I am. So
Yeah,
maybe
and
we
even,
can
for example,
talk about that.
nowadays, in which people go to retreats, for example, and they use mushrooms or even medicine or any
Yeah.
kind of psychedelics, sometimes they have like very deep glimpses of further stages. And then suddenly they are back to the earlier one. But even when they are back to the earlier one, some of the elements of the further stages, they permeate the earlier ones. So it's not like, oh, I've just had a glimpse and now I'm completely back to the earlier one with nothing from the further one, you know? They are kind
Yeah.
of mixed. So sometimes it's really, really hard to separate things when this happens. And we
Yeah,
notice
like,
with a lot of people.
yeah, once you see certain things, you just can't unsee them, is kind of how I tend to frame that.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, once you really get a glimpse of Brahman, for example, it's like you go back to regular life and it's like, yeah, but really, is all this really there? Like, I don't know. It's tough to really fully embrace the existence of everything. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've met quite a few people who have taken this bufo, is it? It's like 5-MeO DMT, and that
Mhm.
seems to bring shoot people into Brahman consciousness,
Mhm.
and they
Mm.
come back and they cannot integrate that. And I know
Right.
one person who developed a whole series of like had an aversion to germs and had to clean all the time, and yeah, really like 2 years of work it took him to get himself back. um so it seems that, okay, yes, you can have glimpses with these tools or these medicines, but how do you integrate them, right? How do you go
Right.
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
0 to 1,000, shot out of a cannon, no
Right.
roadmap? You come back, you just can't integrate it.
Right. Well, and
Yeah.
also it's because it's not, I mean, this is one of the things with the work that we're doing. Like, when someone just shifts there organically and like subtly is like gradually going over time, that's your system doing the work to like find the next thing, right? So you're able to like, even if you slip back into an earlier thing, your nervous system has a route there. Whereas like if it's a chemical or something else that's doing it, there's no route. It's just boom, you're there. And so like, how the heck do you there's how do you bring that back to your normal life? You can't. It's really difficult to do that. Yeah. So I totally agree.
Yeah. In one
Mm.
of the cases, for example, I have a friend who decided to take one of those psychedelics, and then he had like a full experience in Brahman and non-existence, but he was in a very earlier stage. So what happened is that he came back to the early stage, and now he's afraid because he knows what he's going to find in the
Yeah.
future, you know? And then you have to help him to settle down and just come down, and tell him that if he goes organically, he will take the steps to get to that point and not be completely out of this world, you know, completely different from your experience. So yeah, there is a process.
Yeah, and I think with the DMT, right? It's like it's a near death experience, and you don't want to go back there. You don't want to have a near death experience. Well, I guess even me, even when I naturally shifted into Brahman, it was sort of like a near death
Yeah.
experience, right? It was like it feels like you're going to be erased somehow, right? Just
Yeah.
deleted. And if there's any, from what I understand is, right, I still had a sense of I-ness when I shifted into Brahman, and it was the I that was terrified. So I think what happens in an ideal world, right, if you can dissolve the I-ness first and then shift into Brahman, it mightn't be as terrifying.
Yeah, but even if, for example, I had a very early encounter with non-existence of Brahman, and
Yeah,
part of the I was gone. But when
yeah,
I finally got to that point in which I was in that phase, after going through a process, right, there was a sense of, yeah, a weird sense of that it's hard to describe, that it's close to depression in a way,
mm,
because I had depression before. So depression, people think that it's related to sadness, and it's not related to sadness. It's related to lack of meaning, right? You don't get up from bed to take a shower because you think, why? Why would I do that? It doesn't have a meaning, right? My job doesn't have a meaning. And when you get
mm,
to Brahman, which is really the absence of everything, right?
yeah,
If the phase that came before is presence, everything is present, love is present, peace is present, interconnection is present. In Brahman is the absence of everything. So in a
mhm,
way, it mimics those same things, because there's a lack of meaning. You think, okay, this world doesn't exist, even
yeah,
though the eyes are seeing something. You know that it's empty of everything. So that there is to me, there was a quality of nihilism in a way.
Yeah.
yeah.
So why? And then at that time, I thought it was the end. I thought it was the last phase possible, because when you are
There's
in,
so much gravity to
it's
it, man.
really
It's just like,
hard. It's really hard for
well,
you to see
even
what else there is.
like even when I'm working with people, and and at this point, Luciano and I, because we've talked about this, where yeah, it feels like the end, and so obviously it's gonna feel like so final and fatalistic. But now we know there's more after it, so we can tell people, hey, this is not like this is just a phase you're passing through. Like, stick with it, right? Which is huge. But even when I work with people, I've had so many people go when they shift into the final part of like this Brahman phase, they're like, yeah, it feels like there's nothing else I can do. Like there's no further place I can go. And I was like, yeah, okay, I understand it feels that way. But like, and I've told them they know that there are further stages. They 100% know that in their head, but it still subjectively feels like it just clicks into place and there's nowhere else I can explore. And then sure enough, they pop out on the other side of it. But yeah, it for some reason that feeling is very, very, yeah, tangible that it's the end. Anyway.
It it's kind of like you peek behind the curtain
Yeah,
and you can see that there's really nothing there. And
yeah,
Right.
I talk to people about it's like, yes, you're seeing it, right? You're seeing reality. You can speak to people. Everything looks the way it did, right? But it's sort of like you now know that if you could just go to the corner, it's sort of feels like, right, your vision kind of comes
Peripherals.
out, yeah, from the corners of your eyes, right? But you know, if you could just peel the corner back, that there's nothing around the back. It's just
Right.
nothingness, right?
Right.
yeah,
And it's like, well, I know all of this has just been projected for me. I am the enjoyer of all of this, right? But I know really that behind the curtain,
yeah, yeah.
it's nothingness, right?
It's nothingness.
I didn't know what Brahman was when I shifted into it. And I
Yeah.
didn't know that there was a further state beyond it.
Yeah.
So
I didn't know as
when I
well.
found myself, I, I was like, oh my God, I've broken the human.
Right.
I've broken something. I was like, my human relationships are gone. My sense of love for other people is gone. My compassion has gone. I just felt like there's just no meaning to this anymore.
Mhm.
And I kind of, the only thing that kept me going was that I was working with people, right? And I was still being useful. I was still being able to help them and I was still able to communicate with them. So I kind of had this little torch inside that, this glimmer that at least I was helping other people. But I had somehow sacrificed me, the individual, to do this, to become this sort of helper in a way.
Yeah, and I even thought, okay, and now I have to cope with this, because
Right.
Yeah.
so certain traditions, they talk a lot about no self, right? That what is the goal of awakening? Oh, is to realize that there is no self and the world is an illusion. So I thought, okay, so maybe they are right. And now I have to cope that my life, number one, there is no my life. And
Right.
number two, it's gonna be this way forever. Right? There's no other way to
Not
go.
fun.
Yeah,
Not fun though.
it's over.
No, it's
It's
not
over. So
fun.
I have to accept that there is no self and the world is an illusion, and that's it. Thankfully, yeah, that was not the case. That was not the case. But I have to add that we talked to some people that they had lovely experiences in non-existence or Brahman. So it depends, I think, on how much rejection there is in your system against the absence of everything. But
Yeah.
some people find it very peaceful.
Yeah.
So
Well,
Even
there's no
pleasant.
suffering.
yeah,
Right. Exactly.
You're definitely not suffering.
no,
Well, and that's
no,
that's
there's
kind of
no
been
suffering. Yeah, but
the
at the
pattern
same
I've seen. Yeah, is like people who have like really deep, serious traumas, they get into there and they're like, oh, it's not happening anymore. You know, like that's kind of almost what it feels like. It's this buffer against anything that could possibly harm
Yeah.
you. So it is
Yeah.
a sense of relief in a way. Like it feels comforting from that perspective. But if you're used to everything being like beautiful and real and stuff like that, and that was like enjoyable for you, then the cancellation of all that is it can be pretty intense for people. Yeah.
And I think it
So
also depends what are your experiences before Brahman, right? Because a lot of people they are deep into unity consciousness. And then to me, for example, that at the time I would call locations 8, 9, they were wonderful. I felt absolutely powerful. I felt connected to everything. I was seeing like reality being built through the senses of the body, like the infinite was using the senses of the body, which was the infinite itself, to see itself. So it was like wonderful, right?
yeah.
And then suddenly I started noticing something weird, that the world was like ghostly, that everything was like a faded memory. And I thought, there is something changing. I don't know what it is. But I had like a phase before Brahman or before non-existence that we call potentiality. And I remember I went to take a shower, and then I look at the wall in the bathroom, and the wall could be anything. And it was just like my mind that said that it was a wall or it was building a wall, but it could be a flower, it could be nothing, it could be everything. And then I thought, wow, that's really weird. And then I end the shower, I decided to make a sandwich, and I couldn't make the sandwich because the sandwich could be anything. So you see that you are in a process of everything is here, right? Everything is present, like the reality is kind of solid in a way. And then when you're getting close to Brahman or non-existent, you started perceiving, oh, it's not like that. Like time
It
and
becomes a little bit
space,
squishy.
really fluid. So it's a period, for example, in which some people even they perceive like that the past is happening now, future is happening now, everything is happening now, because time and space they become completely different than they were before, right? That solidity goes away. And then after that, it was I went for a walk, and it felt like time and space really crumble into nothingness. And suddenly I thought, this walking is not happening. How is that possible? It's not happening. And there was like a body walking, And I thought, what did happen? And it was the beginning of Brahman for me, or non-existence. Like everything started to completely crumble into nothingness, into the void.
So I'm just wondering if what did you call it? Non-potentiality? Is that
Just
what you call it?
Potentiality, yeah.
Potentiality.
So
So
some
I
people
wonder.
they have that, I suppose, if they consider that to be part of unity consciousness. But probably it would happen more in the end. I don't know.
So
I
I'm
don't
just
know what it was
wondering.
their experience regarding that.
So for after Unity, I went into something that I refer to as Sahaja Samadhi. I
Mm.
just woke up one morning and I was in permanent Samadhi. Like I had been experiencing states. For me, it was like a lot of the real, a lot of the work leading up to Brahman was all done by me going into these really deep states of samadhi, like Savakalpa samadhi, where I would stay, my awareness would stay, and I would just be held there, and I could sit there for hours. And then I would have Nirvikalpa samadhi, where I would disappear, and I would have both of them coming in multiple times every day. It was just taking me. Then I just woke up one morning and I was like, oh, I'm just constantly in samadhi. I know that it's something had changed in me. So I wonder, is that what you're talking about? It was,
Yeah,
and
so,
it was
so
like
it
as if the
seems it
I,
seems to me that you are talking about what we were talking before, this oscillation between the empty and the fullness, right?
yeah,
Because suddenly the
yeah,
body
yeah,
is not
yeah,
there, completely gone.
yeah,
And I had that experience actually after Brahman, that I
right,
was walking and I had to sit on a park bench because there was nobody whatsoever. I couldn't find the body in time space. It was really weird. It was
yeah,
really hard to cross the street because I didn't know whether the body had crossed the street or not.
okay,
It's funny that you're talking about this, and for you happened before Brahman. For me, it happened after
yeah,
Brahman.
yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it definitely was the what I refer to as Savakalpa Samadhi. That was like the most richest fullness. It was so beautiful. I just wanted
yeah.
to
See
stay there
that
for
that's the
hours.
oscillation between one and the other. Yeah, that's very interesting. That for you it
And
happened before.
then and then the Nirvikalpa was like I just disappear, gone,
Right.
nobody, no human, no experience. Come back. Oh, 2 hours has passed. Where have I been for the last 2 hours?
Oh, so
Total emptiness.
do you consider this to be the same as a cessation, like jhana 9 or 10 that some people talk about? Have you ever
That's the
compared?
Buddhism, the Buddhist, is it? They call it that?
Yeah, because in the Buddhist tradition, at least some of the Buddhist tradition, they talk about jhanas, right? That they are the states of
Yeah,
consciousness. Then you go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And
yeah,
then jhana, the ninth jhana or the 10th jhana in some models, they talk about cessations, that you're simply like completely gone and you don't even
yeah,
know how long it was. And
yes,
then when you come back, which is not even waking up, you just open your eyes and you're
yep,
back,
yep,
the reality rebuilds itself. It's like you are rebooted. It's like
yes.
rebooting like a computer. And then you realize, oh my goodness, there is this story in which there is Gareth and who lives in Dublin, I suppose, who has a wife and
Close enough.
kids.
Close enough.
Close enough, okay. And he's a spiritual teacher, but it's everything is a construction. It's really not there.
Yeah,
So I don't know if you're talking exactly about this.
yeah. Yeah. So that 3 months for me, 3 or 4 months, and it was like,
Mhm.
it was like it felt magnetic. Like it was like I had no say in it. It was like it would come for me at random times of the day, and it'd be like pulling me in, and I would feel it was just like, oh, here it comes. I can feel it taking me, and I just go. I'd go. I'd come back
Interesting.
hours later. I'd be like, wow, what is happening? Before there was always me trying to attain these states, me trying to get, oh, today I'm going to have a great meditation. I'm going to use this technique, but this was like something, a magnet pulling me to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, we talked a lot about this as well. That there is a point in the process that it seems that the process takes a life of
finishes
its
or,
own, and
oh
you
yeah,
Yeah,
don't have any saying about that,
yes,
right?
yes,
right. Like there's no way to
Everything
fixate
about that.
anymore. Not that we've seen people try to fixate, I don't think, but even if you do, I think it'd be impossible. It's just like, all right, you're on for the ride now. Welcome to the
I
real
I
journey.
tried to communicate with it. I was like, "Look, you're coming in the middle of my work day." I was like, "Can you just come back at a more suitable time?" And it actually did. It started
Nice.
coming in at different times for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there was one time I went into work, and I had an e-commerce website, and I would have to like pack
Mhm.
it and I came in one day, and it was a Monday, and I had like 100 orders to do, and all of a sudden I could feel it. I was like, oh no, got to the chair in the office. And I came back like 2 hours later, and I couldn't do any of my orders. And so it was a little bit of me going, okay, I have work to do. Please come back when it's more suitable. And it did. It started coming back in the evening times when I was at home. And
Yeah, I think what you're talking about, it's related to cessations. Yeah. If you read about cessations, probably it's that. I was not
okay.
talking necessarily about that. I was talking, for example, going for a walk and then suddenly the body doesn't exist at all. Like it's gone.
But I've had that as well. I've had
Yeah.
that as
Yeah.
well. Yeah. So
Yeah.
for
Like you still
me,
have awareness moment to moment. It's not like you
yeah.
lose
Yeah, it's
consciousness.
not
Yeah,
like
yeah.
blanking and not knowing what's going on at all.
Yeah, one day I noticed that everything looked ephemeral, like it's almost like pixelated, like the walls were pixelated. And I was like, it kind of reminded me when I was a teenager, I experimented with like LSD, and you'd look and everything would be made up of these tiny little particles. And I was like, wow, reality without
Mm,
taking LSD is actually what that is. It's like what seems solid is just like
yeah.
something vibrating,
Mhm.
and appearing to be solid.
Right,
Yeah. Yeah, that is what I was talking about, that you're getting into the potentiality thing.
right.
Yeah,
Because if you think about, out of nothing, there is a field of potentiality, right? There is a field of potential.
yeah,
There is potential for anything to happen. But
yeah,
at the same time, of course, even though there is potential, not necessarily there is probability that will happen. It depends, right?
Right.
So yeah, even when I was, for example, close to Brahman, and there was still that field of potentiality, I would feel, for example, oh, I cannot feel love at all, but there is a potential for love to exist.
yeah,
Right.
And when you
It's
are in pure Brahman, there is not even potential. You don't access potential at all. There is no love, and that's it. So that is
yes.
a little bit the difference between one and the other.
Sometimes I explain it like, Brahman would be like nothing is manifested, everything is just unmanifested, can't manifest, it's impossible. But then like earlier experiences is like, okay, everything is manifested and it's right here, it's very present. But there is a bridge of like going, how do you get from unmanifested to something being manifested? And that's what that middle phase is, like potentiality, where you're seeing like, okay, it's not quite there yet, it's not quite tangible, solid, but it's also not completely absent, not completely gone. Like it's that, yeah, it could be anything. It's not really settling anywhere though. So for me, with you mentioned the visual stuff, I've never had anything quite as intense as that, though I've heard a lot of people talk about that, like pixelation and, the
Mhm.
subtle vibrations. For me, it was more like in my peripheral vision, I could see it was almost like objects were constructing themselves in real time and visually for me. Like they were like fuzzy, and then all of a sudden they would become real when I would start looking at
like
them.
Minecraft.
Yeah.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
little bit like with the chunks
You know,
loading. Yeah.
when you get closer to it, they start popping up, right? That's what you're
Yeah,
Yeah.
talking about.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's actually exactly, that's a pretty good example for that. Yeah, I never
Yeah,
thought
my,
of that
my
before. I
kids,
love that.
my kids play Minecraft.
Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah,
perfect.
or sometimes even like the peripheral vision, everything is non-existent. It's
Yeah,
completely black, pitch black, and only where you're looking at things are kind of
Actually
building up
there.
or more concrete, quote unquote, but you know that it's not really there,
Right. Yeah,
So
that's
that
an
is
interesting
in
phase.
between, let's say.
so for me, right, and when you listen to quantum physicists talking about like reality only exists if it's been observed, right? If there's an observer, when you go into Brahman, you're having
Yeah,
that direct experience, right? It's like,
yeah,
okay, I'm looking at the wall, I'm looking at the computer. You guys are all that exists for me because I know that what's behind me just collapses because I don't need to have that information. It's like the simulation is just it's somehow what's going on in the background, right? You know how it's all working. You can see that, okay, here it has to be. It has to manifest in front of you. But what's behind it is just it's
Irrelevant
unmanifest.
almost. Yeah.
Totally. It just doesn't need to be there. It's like the simulation doesn't have to render it.
Right.
yeah. And I think that there is a phase in which, at least I had, and I think Rasta was talking about this as well, in which you see things being rendered in real time by the senses of the body. They are not really there, but in order for you to function in this 3D world, you need to have like sense of depth and sense of something is wide or something is narrow, right? And then, for example, I had a lot of experiences before going into Brahman, in which I could even perceive like the sound being rendered in time space, which is something that you usually don't perceive, right? You don't perceive sound. You just perceive sound as sound. You don't perceive as something concrete. But when you are accessing all of those layers of what we call reality, it's even possible to perceive the construction of sound, because it's not different than anything else. A sound is not different than a tree, that is not different from air, that is not different from skin, right? Everything is the same thing.
It's all information.
So, yeah, you were just seeing the different possibilities or different variations of the same stuff. I think it's also the idea that comes from Buddhism, right? That everything is clay in the end, even though one is a vase and another thing is like a bracelet, but they all made of the same stuff, and they are not different from each other. Only the eyes or the senses of the body perceive and separate them in categories.
And just to add on to that, I noticed that when I shifted into Brahman, that everything was the same. Like you could literally pick up like a gold watch, right? And it would have, it would be no different to a stick. It's just like, it's just the same. And then you realize that it was just our interpretation of it what really gave it value, because there is no difference. It's all the same stuff. Yeah. And then that kind of goes on for everything, right? It's like fashion, cars.
So actually, I'm curious, because I know I had this experience. I've talked a bit about Luciano. I cannot remember what he said, actually, so this will be fun to re-explore. But for me, so like I was there for like 2.5 months, was how I was trapped there. Even though I had gotten there earlier, I just didn't like staying there. But then I couldn't get out of it for 2.5 months. And that was during Christmas, like the holidays, like Thanksgiving and things like that. So I was spending time with my family. And I knew that like spending time around my nieces and nephews, I don't have any children of my own, so that's the closest thing I got. I knew it was a good thing for me. It was a positive thing for me, but I couldn't feel happiness and joy around them, right? Like I couldn't feel love anymore, because it was just, what is that? There is no, it doesn't exist, that kind of thing. But I would still do it because I knew it was good for me, because so like I was going through all the commitments and motions. However, what I could still feel was frustration. Like that was actually, it really showed up for me. And I wonder if that's anywhere similar to what you had at all, where like the positive didn't show up, but like some of these more unpleasant things just still manifested.
Yeah, I had that.
That's weird.
Yeah.
I don't know what the deal is with that. Anyway.
I think that there are still layers of self, right?
Right.
And those layers of self saying, okay, this is not completely okay with me.
Right.
Right? Yeah, even though we know what really helped me in Brahman, and maybe if someone is going through the process, it may help them as well. When I realized that Brahman was not different from, for example, going to sleep and going to deep sleep. When you go to deep sleep, there are no dreams, right? There is nothing, but it's absolutely restful. You wake up in the morning feeling really good.
You have a break from the
when I got
world.
to the conclusion that Brahman was kind of the same as deep sleep, I thought, okay, I can relax into that. And things started to change. It was really when I thought, oh my goodness, this is actually restful. This is actually interesting. When you shift, I mean, your psychology around that kind of experience, and you start saying, okay, let me explore this instead of rejecting this.
Right.
Yeah.
I liked what Rastal, how Rastal used trapped, because that's how I described it. I had fallen down a well. I was in a dark well, and my life was the little glimmer of light up there. And if somebody would talk to me, I would have to like, oh, okay, somebody's trying to talk to me. I have to come up out of the well, interact with them, and fall back down. But I was there for 2 years. I couldn't get out of it.
I cannot imagine. But Gareth, I think it's important also to say that there is like a wide variation in terms of phenomenology, and I think your case, it's a it's not necessarily the case that everybody has. Up to now, we talked to a lot of people. I think only 3 people described the way you described. There was another woman that we interviewed, and she described exactly the same way, that there was her life was happening
Yeah.
somewhere, and she had to do a huge effort every time someone would talk to her to connect to that life, to that
Yes.
interface, and to relate to other people what was going on. So for me, it was not that profound, even though like nothing existed all the time, and I thought I would forget all of the words. That was my concern. I thought suddenly I'm not gonna know that a door is a door, because concepts, they break apart, right? They are not there. So that was my
Yeah.
concern. I will have an amnesia. I will forget everything,
Right.
how things work.
Right.
But
Yeah.
but I was in a way inside of the dreams, looking at the dream and knowing that the dream was not real all the time. So it was not like so separate like you, for example.
So I felt I was here, but I was also partitioned outside of reality. So it was like
Mm,
both at the same time, and
right.
I could almost like perceive reality from outside. You know, I remember one day being with friends and we were meditating, and I was actually outside of creation looking in at I could see down. I could see there's my little life going on, and there's that little character and having a good time with his friends, and but I was completely outside. I just, part of me wasn't here. It was just in non-existence.
Could part of you
What
actually
else did I,
feel being there with your friends? Was that at that point?
yeah, yeah, I
Okay.
could feel both. I could feel
Okay.
both. Where was I going with that
Sorry.
now?
I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine.
No, to me it's interesting because I was
Yeah, I
even
have it now.
thinking if whether it was this way for you because you had a lot of experiences in sensation experiences right before, right?
Yeah.
So you were outside of the manifesting world, let's say, the manifested reality, completely outside.
So yeah, so I started getting worried when I wouldn't think about my mother, my mum or dad for 2 weeks. I wouldn't even think to text them or do they even exist anymore?
Mhm.
Or I'd walk my kids to school in the morning, and while I was with them, there was love. I was like interacting with them. I'd give them a kiss. Okay, good luck. They'd run off, and I'd turn around. My kids didn't exist anymore. I didn't think about them. I didn't. There was no. And if I did have to think about them, I really had to work to find them in my psyche.
Right.
Okay, I have kids. So it was a really strange, and that went on for a long time for me. It really did. But
Yeah.
I wasn't suffering.
Right.
You weren't suffering, right? Yeah.
And I see people who are in Brahman, right? And they still get triggered, and they're still really bothered by their minds, or they
Yeah.
have these where they can't switch their minds off. So have you come across that?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
We came
definitely.
across people even that they had suicidal ideation during Brahman.
Right.
So
I was
as you
actually
said,
worried about that for
there is,
myself
yeah,
personally. Yeah. Because like when I was first getting glimpses of it, I was like, oh no, this seems like back when I used to be depressed and suicidal because it was like, oh, there's everything's meaningless. But for me, I'm really grateful. It actually like suicide didn't even make sense because even that wouldn't exist. Like it wouldn't change anything, right? It's kind of
Where
what
would you go, right?
exactly that's
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So I
I
was like
mean,
really
you
grateful
already
once I
don't
realized that.
exist. So,
Right, exactly. But yeah, when I we've had at least one person who mentioned suicidal ideations, which was very surprising. Didn't expect that. Yeah.
yeah, but I would like to add as well because otherwise this is gonna be really gloomy, right? Because some people have good,
Right.
positive, quote unquote, experiences in Brahman.
Yeah.
Some people really feel peaceful because it's the absence even of suffering, as you said,
Yeah.
especially if they had been suffering for a long time or prior to Brahman, there was a period of time in which was not really nice for them. They can feel, oh, this is really peaceful. But another thing that I think it's good for us to talk about is that despite of everything, life goes on, right? People continue working, continue having relationships. So it's not like you're going to be completely ineffective or you're going to be completely unable to do anything.
Right.
So that is a misconception. And I think a lot of people that I talk to and we talk to, their greatest fear is that they will get to that phase, for example, and they will have to stop working, or their relationships will fall apart, right? Or they will not feel love for their children, which is true, they will not. So we
It's
have
different
to be
though.
truthful. Yeah, it is difficult.
Was
Yeah,
different.
and it's different. It's a different love. I found that like the human love gets taken away,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That kind of conditional love, and then it's like your children and every other child kind of, they're all kind of the same, really, right?
Mhm.
It's like you don't have preferences. I mean, they're still your, related to you, and they're who you relate to all the
Right.
time. But it's like you don't see, like before it would be like, oh, I have my special group of friends, or this person is really meaningful to me. But then all of a sudden you're just like, well, everything is just one anyway, or
Or
that
zero. Yeah.
human zero. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the mind differentiating things and putting things in little boxes, it's not there anymore,
Yes,
right? It cannot do
yes.
that kind of exercise. And I even remember I was talking to Rastal about this, that like drinking water or going to travel to Paris would be exactly the same thing,
Same thing.
because there's no difference whatsoever between those two things. And of course, before, like going
Yep.
to the gym and going to Paris, which one do you prefer? Well, probably you would love going to the gym because you were like a exercise kind of guy, but that was not my case. Not at all.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Rastal. You go in.
Oh, you can go. I just had a question about your experience of Brahman. Yeah.
Go on.
So during this time you were still like, you had business and stuff like that. You were still like operating
No,
pretty functionally
no,
in the world, or
that had fallen apart.
okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That just prior to that. Yeah. So it was just kind of
Oh, so
wrapping up.
it wasn't even gotcha. All right. Interesting.
Yeah. I don't
Yeah,
know
yeah,
how I
yeah.
would have been. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really difficult, but I'm glad that the period in which I was in Brahman or non-existence was during the pandemic.
Right.
So I didn't have to go outside. I was in my apartment all the time.
Was that was kind of when it happened for me as well.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
I'm glad it was that way. But I remember talking to a friend, and he said, "Oh, so today I went to work, and there was no work. There was nobody doing the work, but somehow work was done.
Right.
So everything is fine." Yeah. So it's exactly feels like that. Yeah. There's nobody doing
Okay.
anything. Work is not really happening because there's no time and space, right? But somehow it happened.
Yeah. Okay. So do we want to go to the next stage where we start reintegrating back into the world?
Yeah, so we use a little bit different languages, Resto and I, but regardless, I think we kind of agree in the
Yeah.
way it happens, right? If before, for example, fullness was separate from emptiness, all those threads were completely separate. The human was
Yep.
separate from the non-human. When you get after the Brahman, all of those things they come together.
Yeah.
So it's really a phase. To me, it's one of the most interesting phases of all of them, because you feel that emptiness and fullness are become not different from each other. The
Yeah,
human
they're the
and
same thing.
non-human are the same thing. So it's really like both and, in a way. If before, like Brahman was no, nothing exists, right? And even before Brahman, everything exists, everything is beautiful. This is everything exists and doesn't exist at the same time. So it's really the convergence of all of those things. And I have like a hypothesis that it depends on the thread that you worked prior to this point. So if you work, for example, on the thread of divinity before, that thread is going to be another thread that is going to be part of this integration. So it depends. For example, if you had a development that included Kundalini, that including the energetic part of the process, that is another element that is going to be part of this package, let's say, after
That's my
Brahman.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, I could really distinguish between the energies in the different states, like the Shakti. I would feel so much Shakti in God consciousness and unity consciousness. And then I had this experience of it's almost like what's known as Sat. You know, when you hear the term Sat, Chit, Ananda,
No. Oh,
truth,
yeah.
consciousness,
Right.
bliss.
Right.
So I started experiencing the power of Brahman, like a descending force, and it felt very different to Shakti, right? That the energies were almost like water and oil. They wouldn't merge, or if I put my attention on one, the other would recede. And then in that para Brahman, everything became one, like the Shakti and the Sat. I couldn't I could actually go in and separate them or put my attention on one, but they were kind of existing as one now for me.
Right.
So I guess that's what you're kind of talking about, but
Yeah.
just that's my way
Yeah.
of relating to it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
for me, it was a process actually. It was not like, for example,
Process.
yeah,
Yeah.
the Brahman ended and then suddenly
Yeah.
everything was the same. For me,
Yeah.
what happened is that I started perceiving, oh my goodness, everything that I thought it was completely gone, because the first part of the process is really a process of disintegration, right? You you are disintegrating like your identities, you are disintegrating concepts, beliefs, everything is kind of going away in a way. Self ceases to exist. And then suddenly everything was back. But in the beginning, I could really say, oh, I could see, for example, that there is the life side. I could see that there is the empty side. I could see that there is this thread that I can go and access if I want to. But they were still kind of being perceived as two sides of the same coin in a way. So they were still kind of separate if you think about it. And then suddenly one day I was again walking, because I was always walking. And then I realized that there was no difference whatsoever between form and formlessness. That was just like, again, a trick from the mind. They has never been different, right? It was only like the mind separating things again and putting in little boxes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then even a thought came to my mind. So are you alive or dead? And I couldn't answer, because the difference between being alive and being dead was not there anymore. So it was when I realized that conceptually things were not different. Like all the dualities that existed in the mind before, like existence and non-existence, self and no self, having a body or not having a body, being human or non-human, they completely ceased to exist. And then it started really to integrate these two big polarities, the emptiness and the fullness. So for a while, I could feel, for example, everything is empty fullness or full emptiness, right? Until the point that everything really became like one, and there was only oneness all the time. But it was a process. And another thing that we perceive talking to people is that when the human part comes back, sometimes a lot of conditioning comes back to be reprocessed, or even old traumas that were not processed before, they will come back in this phase to be processed.
That's
Right.
interesting.
So deep
Yeah.
layers of trauma sometimes come to the surface because there is no identity
Resistance
anymore
to it.
to put them down, to
Right.
keep them.
Well, the thing that I see that happens there is like, so, and this is what we focus on with the work we do with people in our deepening sessions, is when you first start the awakening journey, whatever you want to call it, there you can suddenly access, if you go looking for it, this sense that everything's okay, this like deep peace, stillness, ease, whatever. Whereas before, that would show up if you meditated just right and all your conditions were perfect. But now it's just like there, right? And you can access it. Life-changing to have that. But at a certain point, once you get to this parabrahman, this, union of opposites, place omni-integration, where everything is coming into one, that's just there all the time. You can't even go looking for it because it's just present, even when things are unpleasant. You can be in the middle of a stressful situation, in the middle of conflict with someone else, and it still just feels okay. I mean, I may have mentioned this on the last podcast. I do not remember because I talk about it a lot, but like I had kidney stones and the thought went through my head, is it ethical to call into work today? And I was like puking and writhing in pain, but I felt so okay that I was like, oh, usually I had to associate suffering with calling into work, right? But now I'm not suffering, it's just painful. And I did call into work because obviously I need to go take care of my freaking kidney stones. But like that's the level of like true deep peace, okayness. I didn't have to go looking for it. This pain, this like not suffering, but this intensity, the stress didn't affect that at all. So my theory is that because of that, because everything's okay, even if it's unpleasant, yeah, of course all this stuff is going to come back up and you have to deal with it now. Because what's the difference between having to deal with its unpleasant things or things being nice all the time? Like, okay, so now it just unwinds. And on
So
top of that, yeah, go for it.
no, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry, I cut across you.
I was
Go
gonna
ahead.
say the one last thing is like on top of that, because things feel okay all the time, like legitimately in the foreground, not in a bypassing way, but like in a fundamental, like you just sense it kind of way. When that stuff comes up now, even if you hadn't dealt with it before, had tried to deal with it before, it so obviously doesn't make sense to react to situations in certain ways. It's like, oh, this only makes sense if I don't feel okay. Like this, whatever reactivity is coming up, whatever old conditioning, old habits, old behavior patterns are coming up, it just doesn't make sense because things are actually okay in my life. Like that's just so they tend to unravel a lot easier in my experience, which is very nice, even if it doesn't feel nice in the moment. Yeah.
And the uncomfortable feeling, they're just sensations, right? It's just you
They're
kind of
sensations,
notice them
exactly.
as it's just a sensation in my body. And
Right.
it's not that it's bad or it's good. So I do an awful lot of like I just eat one meal a day, right? And like I mean I go run. It's weird, right? Even like how my body functions now seems to be really different, right? It's like I eat less than 1,000 calories a day, right? And I can run every day, and I feel sensations, right? But I just kind of go, oh, I haven't eaten for 23 hours. My stomach is kind of making funny, you know, gurgling, and it's like that's hunger, right? But it's just a sensation now. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that it's bad. And then it's like before my mind would have came in and was like, your whole day is going to be ruined because you didn't eat enough and you're not going to have energy and you're not going to be able to go for a run. And now I just don't
Right.
even think about that. It's just like, that's just a sensation. And I can still go for my run. And my body doesn't need the food that I thought it used to need, because it's just my mind that was saying I need all of these things, and my body needs this, and my body needs that. It's all just disappeared, and suffering or pain, or not that stuff comes up like that, but it's just a sensation. It's not good or bad.
Right. I made a
Yeah,
joke because
yeah,
Luciano, because we both started experiencing this around the same time because our paths like lined up pretty well this whole time. But he started talking in koans basically. He made this comment like, "Oh, it's like the weather. Today it's here, tomorrow it isn't. Either way, it's just the weather," or something like that. I was like, "Yep, that's
yeah. That
basically
that
it."
that to me was really that. For example, anything would be like, oh yeah, today it's raining, tomorrow we will have sun, and that's it.
Yeah.
There
Yep.
was
So I
no
live.
identification with it.
Right now I'm
And
hungry.
that
In a
is,
bit, I
yeah.
won't be. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's funny because every time I go to my dad, my parents have a house in Spain, and every time I go down, he's always checking his app to see what the temperature is in Spain. And he'd be like, "Oh, 27 degrees in Spain today, girl." And I'd be like, "You're here. Why do you care about like, to me,
Yeah,
Spain
that's
doesn't
like crazy
exist,
to
right?
me.
It just
Yeah.
doesn't exist until I'm there.
Yeah.
So I mean, why do I want to look at a phone to know what the temperature is in a different country when I'm in a house and I'm sat here talking to you? It just doesn't make sense to me. So
You're right. Yeah, I didn't even notice that. That's really funny.
Yeah.
yeah,
But
it's
as I
like,
said, to me it was kind of a process. For example, I had huge problems in the back. I had like herniated discs and all of those things, and pressing nerves, and the leg was completely
yeah,
numb. And I had a lot of pain, like a lot of pain. But I think the pain helped me understand that the pain was not different than equanimity. So it was like a process for you for me at least, to go deep into the pain and to realize that there was no difference whatsoever from no pain. And I could even, for example, at that time, increase the level of emptiness and the pain was gone. So you could play with those levels if you wanted to, you know. But that realization that there was no difference between a sensation and a no sensation was really interesting to me, because that
It's
was
fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Just
Sensation.
one question, guys. So pure divinity. Have you heard that term where it's like a filling up when you go into power Brahman, and it feels like it's like
Yeah.
a flow of platinum light that's filling up the cells. Had you experienced that?
So that's what I was talking about, the threads, because some
Okay.
people, they really are able to separate the thread of divinity from the thread of life, right? And some people, they really collapse those two things together, so it's hard for them to have those experiences really separate. For us, I think when we talk about the thread of divinity, right after Brahman, there was a period in which everything was there again, right? There was,
Yeah.
and then suddenly there was this beautiful
Holiness.
fundamental thing that was everywhere, that was part of everywhere, that was like the most delicate, and it's even undescribable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like unity consciousness doesn't hold a candle to it, you know. It's really the most profound, beautiful. It's the source. For me, I call it primordial force, because to me it was like the source of everything, even the source of the polarity of emptiness and fullness. But I could sense a divine feeling to that, and some people
Divine.
don't.
Yeah.
Some people,
Holiness.
yeah. So we got to a point in which I was able to really access that, and it was like being God itself, but not identified as a God. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was not like before, I am God and I am powerful. No, it was just God being God. And some people, and I know that it's your case, Gareth, some people see that as a feminine thing. So they call the goddess, or they call the divine mother, right?
Mhm.
And some people really feel like, yeah, it's not that I am goddess. There is
It's like
goddess.
there is only that. There's nothing
There is
else.
There
only
is only
that,
that.
and it's
Yeah.
that creates this reality. And
And it happens to be expressing itself through this body, you know, but like this body is just a side
Yeah.
effect. This is the real thing over here, like
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Yeah.
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 For me, that pure divinity started flowing into my system, and it's not that you can see it with your eyes, right? But
Right,
it's like
right, right.
it's like you can sense it, and you can sense that it's like for me it was like a platinum silvery liquid shimmeringness coming in, right? And it was like I could see sort of like everything had that texture to it in my outside world, right? And it had a holiness. It was like it
Yeah,
was like if God had a feeling, and
yeah,
that's
exactly.
God, right? That was, but it's not like God with a personality, or God
Right.
as a person. It's just like a quality, a holiness to it. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I even call the eternal. I used to call the
totally.
eternal. I think, oh, today, yeah, I'm gonna play around with the eternal, because yeah.
Well, I
And
remember, yeah, go for
go
it.
ahead.
Sorry.
No, please go ahead.
I was gonna say, I don't remember which one of us said it, but Luciano, it was impossible to wrap words around, right? But you still try, because like that's our whole
Yeah.
thing, was like noting down our experiences and stuff. So Luciano and I would have conversations for hours going like, oh wait, here's what it is. And then we're like, as soon as we write it out, we're like, no, that's wrong. One time one of us said, I do not remember who it was, said, oh, it's like the breath of God. But as soon as we said that, it felt like the most profane thing to call it, because it was so much more pure than any term like breath of God could be. Like it was so much more delicate than that. It was so much more holy than that. Honestly, like that's a pretty good way of putting it. Like how could you
There's
wrap
no
words
word
around
for
it?
it.
It's yeah, words are too profane for it. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I thought that was funny because that's right in line with
And
what you're
and
talking
then
about.
you start understanding why people write poetry, right? Because
Yeah.
there's no other way you can
Oh, I've
describe.
encountered so many people who just start, they literally only can talk in poetry at that point. I had someone who's never written a poem in their life. And as soon as they got to that phase, I don't even think I told them about the phenomena of people starting to write poetry. But then it was like, hey, I just had this impulse to write this poem, and he sent it to me. I was like, well, yep, you're definitely there. That lines up with everything I've seen. It was really
I
funny.
interviewed Harry Alto last week, and midway through the interview, he pulled out a poem he had written and read it. So it's like,
Nice.
okay, so
But
just a
but
few
but
things.
but one
Go on
one thing
ahead.
that
Go
I
ahead.
would like to ask you, Gareth, about
Yeah.
this, because I heard some people saying that para Brahman is only related to this aspect of divinity. And I had the idea that para Brahman would be this omni-integration, this integration of all of the things that were explored before or was left behind, let's say.
Like including
So I
emptiness,
want to know
right?
what is your opinion? Para Brahman is only the exploration of the divine aspect of everything, or it's the integration of all of those things?
So I think they all exist within it, right? So all
Yeah.
of the states
Yeah.
prior, they
Yeah.
still exist within that, and you can go back and revisit them,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Power Brahman to me, it doesn't seem to finish, right? It seems to
Yeah.
keeps going. Like I don't think there's an end to what's unfolding.
So for us, it
I don't
kind of
want it to be.
shifted. Yeah. For us, it shifted.
Okay.
We
Okay,
can
tell me.
talk a little
I'm
bit about
intrigued.
this. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
what happened is that I thought exactly like you. I
Mhm.
thought, okay, this is the end. It's gonna be like refining itself over and over
Yeah.
and over again, right? But at the same time, there is a sense of finality, saying, no, this is the last stage, let's say. At least for
Yeah.
me and Rastal, and for a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
people we talked to, they have this sense of finality. But at the same time, and I was fine because it's wonderful,
Right.
right? And then what started happening to me was the following. I think one day I was having pain, I think, because of the back. And then I was in the living room and a thought came into my head. If nothing is separate, how it's possible that I can welcome or reject anything? That was the thought. And I started perceiving that everything was happening by itself, only by itself. There was nothing to do with anybody, not with me or other people. It was just like that idea. I think even in Buddhism, they say in the herd, only the herd, in the scene, only the scene. There was nothing to do with me per se. And I thought that was the first time that it was like a livable experience. And more that experience started to happen. Everything was just happening by itself. That's it. There was no connection whatsoever to a Luciano or to a system, because we tried to connect. Oh, my system is doing this. I'm feeling this, right? It was not even a sense of I amness anymore, because sense of I amness had gone away much before. And I started to noticing that there was still a quality that was still there. There was a knower that knows that something is happening, that knows that a phenomenon is occurring. Even though you don't connect this to a self, or you don't connect this to an ego even, right? Or you don't connect to yourself, there is a knower. And that is a pure knowing. It's like awareness has this capacity of being aware. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing, no connection to any self. And then suddenly what started to happen, which was the pinnacle, I think, of some Kundalini kind of thing, is that I started noticing, for example, a sensation in the body was happening by itself. And this sensation was the entire universe living that sensation and dying and rebirthing and dying and giving birth to itself and dying again. Yeah,
Okay.
I've
I
seen
had
that
it as
too, but
well.
it has nothing to say.
Yeah.
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 And every time I would go to bed, it was really hard to sleep because every single sensation was the entire universe living that sensation, was not me or anybody. And I thought, this is impossible. It's impossible to live this way. Because if I would like hear a sound, was the entire universe giving birth to itself as a sound and dying. Yeah. And suddenly I was, it's like, it's, I don't even know how to phrase this. There was only all the time the universe giving birth to itself and dying and giving birth to itself and dying and giving birth to itself at any nanosecond. It was really impossible to control, and I wanted to control. I wanted to, for that to stop or to slow down or something to happen. And I was really distraught. It was like what people that go in the process of fetters, they call fetter 9, which is restlessness, that it's not even like an aversion against something. It's just restlessness being restlessness by itself. And I talked to a friend, Pierce Salguero, who had gone through this process, and he told me, Luciano, there's no way for you to control that, because this part of the process is about losing control completely, because you are still trying to connect a knower to something because you still want stability. And I thought, oh my God, so what is possible to be done? Nothing is possible to be done. You just surrender and let it happen. It felt to me like a car that is going to hit a wall, and there's nothing to be done because there is no time to turn the car around, and you have to let it happen. And that's what I've done. And when I done that, it was gorgeous. It was, again, the universe living itself and dying and living itself and dying, but it was very
through your body though, right? Through the body.
It got to a point in which there was not even the body, it was the entire universe by itself.
Yeah.
And it felt
your body
like,
became the universe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like the universe was having a Kundalini awakening. That was the feeling.
Yeah.
And then when I relaxed, that everything collapsed. Perception collapsed. The field of awareness that existed, at least for me in Brahman or in Omni, completely collapsed. And I was not able anymore to know whether something was there or not. So instead of in Omni or in Brahman or whatever you want to call that phase, you really perceive that both things are there at the same time. Now it was not possible to tell, because that mechanism, the knower, was completely gone. The subject and the object collapsed completely, the relationship between them, even the most subtle aspect of that relationship. And then everything was gone. Like the beauty, the possibility of divinity, any kind of phenomena, you don't even know if it's there or not. And then Rastal was talking to me during that process. And Rastal was really skeptical, saying, I was also thinking that this, like Omni and Brahman, was the end of the process. Are you sure, Luciano, that you are going through a shift? And then I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure. And then he started having all of that stuff.
Well, I mean,
you can
before
in a different way,
yeah,
so
very different way. But also, I do want to say, we've been through this process long enough together that like I could after I talked with you for a bit about it, I could recognize that, oh wow, this is actually something very different than I've ever experienced. So I could tell, okay, Luciano actually did push further than I did, because that had like we had gone back and forth on that, right? Like where one of us would go further than the other, and we'd be like, oh hey, there's this new thing I'm experiencing. I was like, oh yeah, I haven't touched that yet. That's really interesting. I wonder when that's going to happen to me. So this felt like that category after we talked for a bit. It's like, all right, well, I guess I'll resign myself to whenever that happens to me. And it did. I do want to say though, I won't go into too much detail about how it happened to me. It was somewhat similar, but from a different perspective, because I don't really identify with things like the universe having an experience. But like it felt like I was dying and being reborn every second, right? Like, so it was a similar thing that happened to me, where all this energy happened. It felt like all the energy in the universe was concentrated literally inside my body. I was like, oh, if this keeps increasing, I will literally die. Like, there's no way this is possible to continue in this route.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that something?
Yeah, yeah.
Let me just
I would
make
have come
a
in
quick.
as well. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm dying to hear your experiences as well, Gareth. But
100%.
go ahead,
Let me wrap
Russell.
this up because I'm very curious. For me, the main thing I noticed, because Luciano talked about the collapse, and that's 100% what happened. And we talk about these different dichotomies, like not even making sense anymore. So through this whole process, through this whole journey, first, like I was the one making decisions, right? Like I could tell that I was coming up with decisions, then making them. When I would say something, I would think about it and then say it. Then it starts to become where, oh, the decisions were just making themselves, or the words were just speaking themselves. I could still perceive an intention sort of forming in my system, but I didn't feel attached to that intention anymore. At a certain point in Para-Brahman, omni-integration, those felt like the same thing, right? Where like, oh, is the intention is happening, but also there is no intention. Like, where would the intention come from or even start? Now, what happened is I can't even perceive any intention, any decisions anymore. Either everything is a decision or nothing is a decision, is what like subjectively it feels like on a moment to moment basis. So I tend to not think about it. Like it's either infinite volition and will happening, infinite agency, or zero agency. I don't know. Like agency literally doesn't make sense. Decisions don't make sense on a fundamental perceptual level. I cannot see them anymore, which is so much different than anything else that I've ever experienced. And that applies to a lot of different things like human, non-human, alive, dead. Like those concepts don't really, they like fundamentally don't make sense. Not that they're the same. Like I can't understand the concept on a subjective
it's
level.
more like neither nor than both and.
Yeah.
So are you human or not human? Neither, right? Neither.
Right.
Because
Like I don't
those
understand what human
concepts stop
means.
making sense.
Human is gone. Human is totally
Right.
gone.
Even though I'm operating as a human, obviously, yeah, from a
Operating
certain
as a
perspective.
human.
But yeah,
Yeah, that
anyway,
makes
So
a
what
lot
is
of
left
sense.
is really like the conditioning, right? That continues to work by itself even.
Yeah.
That like Pierce calls the autopilot, which I think it's an interesting concept.
yeah,
But that overseer, that element, that little mechanism that was always observing and connecting experience to a system, it's not here anymore. So even, for example, if someone asks me, oh, pay attention to your sensations, but I don't know if sensations are here or not. Like in Para-Brahman was more like, yeah, they are here, and as soon as you pay attention, they are not. So it's almost the same thing, right? Existence and non-existence. Now, are they really happening? So I went through a phase, for example, in which I didn't know I was breathing. So I would stop and say, oh, do I need to be worried? And then I realized,
Or
okay,
do you even need oxygen?
right. Yeah.
Eh,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's like have we just gone out of this reality where the laws of nature are at play, and do we actually even need any of that? Food, and I know it's possible, right? Because there are people who
Yeah,
stop
there are
eating.
people.
Uh,
Yeah.
all of that stuff, yeah, you go beyond. So just if I can just come
But
back
on the other
to
hand, I just want to finalize one thing that now all the specialness of awakening is gone.
yeah,
So for example, now there is no possibility of splitting from something. So I don't access any states of consciousness like before. I cannot access divinity. I cannot access emptiness. I cannot access fullness. I don't even know what fullness and emptiness mean anymore. So it's like becoming a dumb human again, but human doesn't even make sense.
hmm. Okay.
I want to hear Gareth's experience.
Yeah.
So it seems that there's like a kind of a triad, right? There's Brahman, non-existence, there's God, and then there's the feminine aspect of God, right? Which is that which is creating our realities, right? Our worlds. And we are the experiencer of that, right? So
Mhm.
as I went through all of these stages, the first thing I experienced was Brahman, right? And it was I became the Brahman, right? I
Right.
literally, my
Mm.
soul got sucked into that, and I had the experience of Brahman. I
Right.
Brahman, and I became it, right? Then I had the
Mm.
experience of God, right?
And
Pure
you
potential.
become God, yeah.
And I was there, and it was like it wasn't me going, "Oh, I'm having the experience." I'm here, and there's God, and I was, God was experiencing itself through my little form, and I was it, and it was all just one, right? And then I had the power Brahman. You come back in, you feel the divinity. Then it quietened down for a while, and then I had the experience of what felt like the Divine Mother. She came into my body. She ex gave she had the experience of herself through my physical form. Okay. And exactly what you described as almost like every cell was having this sort of orgasmic explosion of
Right.
like a galaxy coming into birth
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm,
dying. Like
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm,
all going off at the same time,
mm-hmm.
thousands of explosions all around my body, galaxies coming into creation, galaxies dying, and she was doing it
Yes,
all, right?
yes,
And
yes.
she was saying, "Now you're tasting what I am." She was like, and she was terrifying. She was like the
Yeah.
thing that reminded me is like Jurassic Park, right? It's like the T-Rex comes down to the car, and it's like this thing can rip me asunder in any moment. And I
Yeah,
got to feel what she was, right? And it was
yeah,
like
yeah,
incredible. It
yeah.
was just
It
like,
is,
and
it
that
is
was the
incredible. Yeah.
triad. Yeah. And I
It's
begged her to
funny that
stop.
you use these two words because it is outstanding and terrifying at the same time. It
Yeah.
is
I
beautiful, the
begged
most
her.
wonderful thing, and yeah, and
I was like,
absolutely
"You're going to
destructive
kill
in a
me.
way. Yeah,
You're
yeah,
going to kill me. I cannot
yeah,
keep this going. Please stop."
yes,
And
yes.
I just kept saying, I'd say, "Thank you. I really appreciate this. It's amazing. But please stop. You're going to kill me. I'm going to die." And it would have, like, my body couldn't handle it.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And
And
I
then what
said
happened
exactly
was,
that. I cannot live this way. How a person can live this way, right?
yeah,
You cannot.
yeah. So,
Because
so then what happened was, right, and similar to what you just experienced, you just spoke about there, everything went quiet. Really, really quiet. Like no access to phenomena, no, like nothing outside of my own direct experience.
right,
Nothing. I can't
nothing.
find anything outside of myself.
Hmm.
There's no gods or goddesses turning up. There's nothing. And is that the same for you guys?
Yes, there's no out of the body experiences. There's
Nothing.
nothing, nothing. There's no
What
access
happened?
to
What
this
happened?
Well, it's not
beautiful.
even an in the body experience. The body is
Yeah,
there, and obviously that's where like
just a concept.
there's things showing up, right? But it's not like I'm not connected to anything that's showing up at all. Like even on a perceptual level, like the raw perception, the raw connection to perception, it feels gone. Like there's no even like direct. That's why the whole like not being able to tell if you're breathing. For me, like, I mean, I did breathing meditation for almost every day for over a decade, So I got really good at sensing, oh, it's coming through the nostrils and going into my whatever, like lungs and diaphragm expanding. I could tell every single sensation. Once this happened, I literally, when I would focus on it, I could no longer tell. It felt like the breath disappeared and all the sensations would literally disappear. Like I could not even connect with them anymore because there's no like relative experience of anything. Yeah. So yeah, everything just yeah, all
So
that other
what I
stuff.
think, Gareth, is that when integration, real integration happens or ends, it's not possible to be perceived anymore because you would need to detach something to perceive an object that is separate from you. And if it's not
Yes.
separate anymore, how you're going to perceive that?
I
There's
can't.
no way.
I can't.
Yeah.
So what's happened at the end? Can you explain that?
So that's the end. That's to me is the end of
So
awakening,
what
is
have we become?
passionate and spirituality.
What have we
What have we
become?
become? That's a great question.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, and I call this post omni because I call the previous phase omni integration, but it's post integration, full integration. And I had a sensation that you had gone through this, because you were the only person that I really had talked to who told me that all of the phenomenology was gone.
Gone.
Yeah.
Completely. Like nothing going
No,
on. Now, I
nothing.
mean, I feel amazing, right? My body
Yeah,
feels great. There's
yeah.
fullness, there's energies all the time, but like there's no phenomena going on. There's no paranormal. There's no, I don't perceive good, bad entities, any of that out. Nothing. I just have my
Nothing.
own direct experience.
Yes, that's it.
So I thought there was something wrong. I thought I had put a footstep somewhere. It kind of reminded me of one of them movies, you know, where you get to the end and they just leave you hanging. It's just like the end of you ever watch the end of Sopranos, and they kind of leave it where it could have been a whole lot of different things that.
God. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's so funny because people, for example, say, "Oh, yeah," and then I go for a walk, and then there is this beauty and this divinity, and I said, "Nope." I mean, as you said, I don't feel any distress
Yeah,
whatsoever,
of course not. Yeah.
but I don't even know how to call this what it is, because there isn't. In order for you to call something, you need duality, right?
Yeah, even calling it good,
You
like the
need to be
previous
able
phase.
to have a position to stand on and to look at something and say, "Oh yeah, this is this." But how you're gonna do that?
There's like no perspective.
There's no perspective.
Yeah, the
So I
previous
mean,
phase, I was really
go
like,
ahead, Rastal.
yes, this is very positive to me, is how I felt about it, right? Like this is such, my life is better, blah, blah, blah. Like now I'm like, life is happening, and whether or not it's better and good is kind of feels irrelevant on a moment. I wouldn't even know how to assess it personally. Like that's my subjective experience right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could connect to something outside of myself, like an intelligence. And, in meditation, I could ask questions and I would get answers. And, I could have a relationship with gods and goddesses. They don't exist anymore. They've gone. And I was
They
like,
don't.
they've just left me. They've just gone, right, you're on your own. And it kind of feels like that now.
Yeah.
It's like, well, why would we get involved? Like we just be interfering with your free will or your process. It's all on me, right? It's
But
everything's on
at
me.
the same time, because as you said, during the process, in Brahman, for example, you become Brahman, right? You
Yeah,
become
yeah,
nothingness. Then
yeah,
in the other part of the process, I became the primordial force that I called. I didn't
yeah.
call God. You became the goddess. After
Yeah.
that, what is there to become? There's nobody to become anybody or
I mean,
anything.
life, but
Yeah,
here now in the
yeah,
body is
that's it.
amazing.
Yeah, and
I think
that's
we should
it.
probably end on that, like one of these movies.
I was just gonna say, like, if we ended right now, that'd be really funny.
Where just the screen goes black.
Exactly. I just
In the middle of one of our sentences. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Incredible. I'm
Who
so
knows
glad
what
we
this
did
is?
this.
I have no idea what
Yeah,
this is.
you're kind of back at the start, aren't you? You're just kind of like,
Yes, yes, yes.
Which is a thing in a, like, there's a handful of traditions that are like, I mean, even if you look at some of the quotes from the, I'm pretty sure this is original quote from Buddha, is like, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water; after enlightenment, chop wood, carry water, that sort of thing. You leave the boat after you cross the river, like, because you don't need the boat anymore. So it's just like you're
yeah.
just back
Or
where
even
you
the
started.
10 knocks hurting pictures, right?
The Zen
That
circle.
you go back to the start, you go back to going into the market
Yeah.
and being like a normal person. Of course, all of the psychological distress is gone,
Mhm.
right? And that's huge.
Yeah.
Like, but what it's interesting to me is that not even the idea of separation or non-separation makes sense. So if someone asks me, for example, yeah, but you still feel like you're not separate from anything, and I said, no, that doesn't make sense. Separation or non-separation, it's not here.
Right.
It's something else.
Like
Those
union
things
doesn't make
were
sense.
integrated, and I think that everything that is integrated, you stop perceiving that thing if it's really integrated.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible. Great. What a conversation, guys.
Yes,
fun times.
likewise, it was great.
I guess there'll probably be 5 people watching though that'll understand what we're talking about.
I know. I was thinking about some of this, like, man, this is really
Yeah.
this is some esoteric stuff we're getting into now. Hopefully
Really,
I mean, but like wrestling with language, I know it's impossible to wrap, like we're using words for things that words were not made for. Let's just like clear that up. So this is always going to be wrong. The words are always going to be incorrect. But there's something to trying to wrestle it into words that people like can, at least once they get there, they go, oh my God, this is what they were talking about. Like there's a reason the we reference the Oxford underpaintings, right? The return to the marketplace. Like, even though that's not necessarily 100% like this precise thing, it's like, oh, maybe this is what it was saying. Like, oh, okay, like this makes sense to me. Hopefully that'll be, someone can relate to that at some point, but yeah, we'll see.
I mean, the video is going to be up online forever, right? It's going to be, 10 years from now, a lot more people might be going through this sort of an awakening,
right.
and they might find this and be really, really useful.
It does seem,
so,
in our experience, it seems like more people, at least in our circle, are going through it.
Yeah.
It's
Like, we know at least 5 or 6 people, that for sure.
And there'll be the 5 people who'll probably be watching this video.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant, guys. That was great.
Well, that was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and we'll probably come back again and do another one at some stage.
I'm always on
so
for
listen,
anytime.
thank you, Rastal. Thank you, Luciano. That was amazing. And thank you for everyone for watching. Thank you, guys. And again, I'll put links to the 2 guys, their details down below. And Rastal, do you want to briefly talk about your methods?
I mean, we can. If you
No,
want.
I mean, just
I don't know how much context
you work
to give.
with people. Yeah, I mean, you work with people though and help them kind of.
Yeah, go from that early equanimity to where it's like just there all the time, basically. Yeah, I mean, at a high level, what we do is we get people to, one, get better at bringing their awareness of that okayness, that sense of stillness, peace, ease into the foreground. Like, so that's a skill that you want to cultivate if you're trying to go deeper in this process. That's probably the main skill you want to cultivate, is like, how do I get better at just bringing my attention back to that experience? And then gradually over time, it comes more and more to the foreground. So that's one thing. But then in our sessions with people, we do where we basically we get someone to do that. So they're sinking into their experience of, awakening, fundamental being, consciousness, awareness, whatever they resonate with. And then once they're kind of settled there and feel pretty solid, like you have kind of a stable base of that experience, then what you can do is start to lower, like literally you physically imagine yourself going lower through that experience, like downwards in a downwards direction. For some reason, that's the thing that works as a kind of mnemonic
It's sinking
device.
in, right?
Yeah, like literally sinking lower through it. And then at a certain point, you can start to perceive what's beneath the current experience, like maybe new qualities start showing up. Then you just let those kind of grow more in your awareness. You pay attention to them more, like allow them to start growing as the previous experience that you were just having fades into the background a bit. And eventually it sort of flips to where all of a sudden what you are experiencing is these new qualities completely. And the previous experience just goes out of awareness. And then you just allow yourself to settle into the new experience and settle there. And then we guide people through some inquiry questions just to kind of like try to get more of it integrated into your awareness with your mind. You're trying to answer them, so you're interacting socially, which helps you stabilize in this new experience, right? So I did all that on my own when I was going through this process. I literally just used that as a technique. I could arbitrarily shift further and further, and that's how I got into Brahman and everything else afterwards, was just by using this technique, doing one shift at a time. It could just like keep pushing, and then I was like, oh, that's interesting, this is different than before, and I could say, oh yeah, I suddenly don't exist anymore, that's interesting, that's different than before, stuff like that. What we've noticed though is that for a lot of people it's really difficult to do on your own. Like on retrospect, I have a long history of working with consciousness and doing all these like consciousness exercises to hold multiple conflicting things in awareness at the same time. So it makes it easier to like, okay, I have to let myself go, but also guide it at the same time. So that's kind of the trick. That's where we work with people. It tends to be a lot easier for you to just trust someone else and they're walking you through the process.
So like doing therapy, right? It's like sitting with a therapist.
Yeah, similar to therapists, I really don't want to get lumped in with therapy because there's a lot
No,
of like
no, no, no,
we
no.
don't
But
need
I'm
to
talking
know any
about,
personal information, but yes, it's like that.
No, I mean that
yeah,
it's easier,
but
that it's easier to do therapy
yeah,
therapies
100.
rather than by
Yeah, if you have
yourself.
someone
Yeah.
guiding you, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
100% yes. And like we've even had people who like did successfully do it a couple times on their own, but he came into a session, he's like, oh my God, I didn't realize how nice it would be to just literally like your hands are off the wheel and like you can just trust that someone
Yeah.
else is guiding you on the journey. So yeah, we've seen people, at least in my work with people, I've seen people make some insane progress, like going from the really early stages of this all the way to para Brahman, like just in
Wow.
6 to 16 sessions, which is kind of wild, like really incredibly unexpected. And then we have a couple other coaches who are working with people and they're seeing like really good similar progress than others. So it's been crazy, unexpected, and a blessing to be a part
Amazing.
of. Very cool.
Great.
Yeah.
Great work, guys. So I'll put a link anyway if people want to find you guys
Sure.
for that kind of work. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Gareth. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Amazing,
Yeah, that was
amazing,
awesome.
amazing conversation. Thanks so much. Okay, bye-bye. Thanks, everybody.